Welcome everyone to another episode of the world's greatest news and reviews.
Giving you opinions about nerd stuff is our superpower.
I'm Captain Mal.
I'm Halestorm.
I am Weapon 2.
And I legitimately forgot that I go first with that, so that's why there is a little bit of a pause. But thank you for joining us on this episode of the world's greatest news and reviews. We are going to be bringing you a classic movie review suggested by our very own Halestorms. Because this is, spoilers, one of her favorite movies of all time. Halestorm, what are we talking about today?
I have assigned for you to watch, which is what we're doing, right? We are each going to assign a movie for the others to watch.
Mm-hmm. That
and
is
then
correct.
Review.
Yes.
I went first because I instantly knew what movie I wanted you guys to watch and review, and that was Tank Girl.
Yeah, so we are going to review Tank Girl. Came out in 1990s. What year? Do you know off the top of your head?
I believe it's 95, but I could be wrong.
It feels mid to early 90s. But yeah, and so it's based off the comic book of the same name. So before we get into it, Hailstorms, if you want to start, give us an overview of what the movie is about and go ahead and say what you think. Give us your thoughts. Why do you love the Tank Girls?
I love this movie. I've loved it since it came out. This is a story about a girl named Rebecca Buck. She lives in a post-apocalyptic future. I believe the year is 2033. Pretty close to that.
No, it isn't.
Yeah. She lives in a commune with some other people, and the big major issue is that water is a scarce resource. And so there's a big company run by Malcolm McDowell called Water and Power that basically they mine water, they do whatever they can to get water, and that's their main currency. And the commune that she lives on, they steal water. And so it's basically, you know, there's all this back stuff happening. That's the whole plot of the movie. But the reason why I love this movie is just how ridiculous she is. And it's pretty close to the actual comic book. She's just this way out there character that just says everything, is like super irreverent, just everything is crazy. Her boyfriend in the comic book is a half kangaroo, half man named Booga. There is a Booga in the movie that she hooks up with, but in the comic books, they're long-term relationship.
So before you keep going, I want to throw this out there before I forget. So Weapon 2 and I watched this movie last night, and we didn't talk about anything that we thought of it like after the fact, but as it's happening, like the kangaroo people show up, and I'm just like, hey, fun fact, kangaroos can't hop backwards. And he's just like, oh, what the fuck? Why do you know that? Okay. And then like
Everybody
we're watching
knows
it.
that.
No, and then we're watching it.
I
and
didn't know
then
that.
like the kangaroos, they're walking like normal. And I'm like, well, this is annoying. And he's like, what? I was like, they're not hopping. Like kangaroos can't move their legs independently. They can't walk like that. That's why they hop. And he's just like, what are you, like some fucking kangaroo scientist? Like, he's like, no, he's like, that's not even true. I'm like, that's totally. And then we got into like a 10-minute argument where I had to pull it. I was like, this is totally true. He's just like, he looks at it, he's like, no, for real, what are you, like some fucking kangaroo scientist? And then the going joke with the rest of the night was he just kept calling me a kangaroo scientist. So that was pretty funny.
So did you guys even pay attention to the movie? That
Yes,
would be
we
my
did.
question.
No, we did.
Okay.
We did. I paused it to have this argument.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, let's not forget that these were kangaroo mutants.
Yeah.
They were not 100% kangaroo.
Yeah.
And also, it was not a documentary.
Were they 50-50?
What?
Were they 50-50? What was the percentage kangaroo to human being?
It was
Don't
at
start
least
with
60-40 human.
Don't start with me.
60% human, 40% kangaroo?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that's what I think.
So some tidbits about this movie, some behind the scenes stuff. Some of it I've mentioned before in other videos, but this was only the second movie with made from a comic book with a female star. The first one was Supergirl, and it was 10 years earlier. So it's not like we had a whole lot of representation in the movies. Basically what happened is the director, Rachel Talalay, saw the comic book and wanted to make the movie. Lori Petty, the actress that ultimately played Tank Girl, found out this movie was being made and was sure she was perfect for it. They cast a different actress, and Lori Petty never lost faith that she was going to be Tank Girl because she knew she was perfect for it, and I don't deny that at all. She was absolutely perfect for it. The other actress quit after they demanded that she shave her head, which of course, and she wouldn't do it, so that she quit. They got Lori Petty. They're talking about remaking the movie now with what's her name from
Margot
Suicide
Robbie.
Squad? Yeah, Margot Robbie with her. I don't think that that's going to be horrible, but I will always love Lori Petty as Tank Girl. And we talked about before that that Courtney Love was supposed to be in the movie. She was supposed to be Subgirl, which I don't know if you remember in the movie, is this very tiny, tiny part. She's a redhead that they go to. But Courtney Love ended up dropping out when Kurt Cobain killed himself and then came back to be the music supervisor. We talked about that in the best soundtracks of all time because that's one of my favorite movie soundtracks. There were a lot of issues when they made the movie because the studio that they eventually ended up making the movie with didn't really understand what was happening or why the movie went the way it did, and they kept asking questions like, so what's her motivation and how did she become this way, and like wanted all this backstory and didn't understand that sometimes you just have a character that you just take at face value. You don't have to understand like everything behind, especially in a post-apocalyptic movie. You just understand that they come from everything before that. So I'm fully prepared for you guys to not appreciate this movie as much as I do, because I get it. I get that it's me looking like having always loved this movie. So, and there's a lot of background to it, like having been, I mean, at one time back when you used to have themes on your desktop where you would have like an error, like you would have a loading sound and an error sound. I had a Tank Girl theme on my computer.
That's awesome.
Back in the 90s. Yeah. So, I don't know. I'm not as good at telling what it's about as you are, but
you hit the nail on the head.
I think
What are
you
you
did a
talking about?
good
You did a
job.
great job explaining it, and and your fondness for it, and the history of the production, and all that. Like, don't ever say you can't explain shit. Like, you just threw it all out there.
I don't make it as fun as you do, though.
I mean, no, nobody does, but
but I love it. I love the movie,
That's cool,
and I'm
okay.
prepared for whatever you guys are ready to throw at me.
Weapon 2, do you want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
So, first off, I love the comic book. The comic book is crazy. It's kind of insane, but it's in a great way. So, what I think the movie did the best was continue to put clips of the comic book through, so it's not completely out of context. You see where it's coming in, and it's and you say, oh, that's why it's so crazy like this. I think it helps a lot with that. And I've never watched this all the way through before last night when we watched it, and then I watched parts of it again today. And I'll say this. I think that this movie is first a victim of the 90s because it kind of reminds me when you're watching, if you watch it completely out of context, it's kind of like Pee-wee's Playhouse television show to me. It's all this crazy stuff coming out of nowhere and going on. You can tell it didn't have a real high budget, and I think that if this was not done in the 90s, because I think it's really a fine line between something that is really crazy in a cool way and something that somebody goes, holy cow, this is just kind of dumb. And so I think that it's kind of I think if this thing was done now and it had a higher budget and it probably had a little fine tuning and tweaking in the acting and directing, I think that a larger part of the audience would probably fall in love with this thing more because of that. I think that after watching, I'll tell you, the first time I watched it, I wasn't that fond of it. I thought, and it wasn't because I thought everything, it was for the reasons that I just said, but I'll tell you, watching parts of it again today, I was like, I think this is the kind of movie that becomes a cult classic. I think it's the kind of movie that gets these fans that are really, really diehard, loyal fans to it. And I think it is kind of one of these movies that sometimes is way over the top, or sometimes at the beginning people think aren't that great a movie. But I think that it's a kind of movie that people do kind of could find themselves kind of falling in love with a little bit and becoming kind of a cult classic that people for that reason. So that's kind of what I thought about it. What did you think?
So I agree with pretty much everything you said. I feel the thing I think this movie did the best was include footage from the comics, because it kind of helps put everything in context, and it kind of shows you the wacky, like, over the top ridiculousness that is a comic book. Now, I've never read the comic book. I knew nothing about this character other than what Halestorm has told me. What this movie made me want is to read the comic book, because I feel like the comic looks crazy and over the top and a lot of fun. This movie's biggest issue is that it was made in the 90s, because I feel like this premise would be super interesting if you cast Margot Robbie, give it $100 million budget, and just let somebody who gives a shit about the comic book make a movie they're passionate about. I think it would be everything Birds of Prey wished it was. I think it would be a great, fun, action freaking comedy with like a great female lead who doesn't give a fuck, and it would be awesome. As it stands, the thing that kept popping in my head for an analogy was Judge Dredd versus Dredd. I feel like Dredd shows how great that story could be, but when you look at the mid-90s Judge Dredd, it is awful and has every cliched thing that like 90s comic book movies had, and I feel like that's what this movie had also. This movie, you could tell, was made in a time where people didn't take this kind of source material seriously. Now, I 100% understand, especially if you're a female and you were around and watched this when it came out, with the lack of representation, like you talked about, how you would endear yourself to this character and you would love it and you would be on board with everything that the movie did. So I totally 100% understand your love for it. As a person who's watching it for the first time, though, holy fuck, it was rough for me. It was like so rough, but like there were all these moments where I'm like, this could be so good if it was done now. But as it stood, it was 90s in all the worst ways for me, if that makes sense. But I wanted to make this clear because I don't want to just like shit on the movie for the sake of that. I just feel like this could have been really cool. And I feel like an example of how this could have been really cool is Scott Pilgrim versus the World. That movie felt like you were watching a live action comic book. It had like scenes where it would show straight fucking scenes, animated scenes out of the comic in the same animation style. And it's crazy and over the top and fun. But I've had so many like non-super nerdy people like watch part of that movie while I'm watching and are like, this is the dumbest fucking thing I've ever seen. Like, what the hell is happening here? And I'm like, no, but it's amazing because, you know what I mean?
Well, and I think that's the thing, is that comic books have had their own language for years. And it's taken a while for that to translate to the big screen, because there has to be something. You either decide that you're going to keep reminding people that it's from a comic book, and so it's a different thing, or you pretend it's a movie and everything's linear and you do everything and tell a story and everything. And at the time, comic book movies weren't a thing.
Exactly.
So the things that had come out were what? Supergirl and Superman.
And Batman had come out at that point.
The first one, right?
Well, this came out in 95. So the first two had come out. Yeah.
Okay.
Some really bad Captain America, some really bad
shitty,
Fantastic
so like
Four,
there was no great...
Some really bad stuff.
Nothing
right,
good,
right. But nothing big. Nothing... I mean,
well, Superman and Batman were both big.
Yeah, they were big, but I mean, like...
Aside from them, yeah.
But they treated those as stories that had characters in them from the comics, but they didn't treat it like a comic book movie.
Right.
Tank Girl, they treated like a comic book movie, which is one of the things I love about it. But you do have to understand, I mean, you do have to accept it in the context of of when it came out, in the sense that it's not that it's dated. For me, it's not dated by when it came out. It's dated by the fact that nobody understood how to make a movie that reminded everybody that it was a comic book movie.
And I think another big part of this is the way comic book movies were approached back then. I think a big part of it's different now, because I think a lot of the people making movies now were fans of comics 20, 30 years ago, right? So many of these movies are being taken seriously and made by people who love them because they grew up reading them. Not necessarily the case in the 90s, and I think that shows a lot in the quality of current comic book movies. Now, for the most part, right?
Well, the director was a huge fan, but nobody from the studio understood what was happening.
Exactly.
And so for them, it was like, this doesn't make sense.
And like
we
you
don't
said,
know.
like, what's her motivation? It was like, okay, not everything needs to have a bunch of layers and be super deep. How about she's just fun and crazy and doesn't take shit from anybody, and it's over the top, insane fucking action, because that's what the comic is. And again, I'm on board for that, and I feel like if done now, cool. I feel like the 90s of it and like the studio, like it was a rough movie for me to get through, but it's not the source material. It's how the movie was put together to me. I didn't really like. But again, I told you a bunch of times, like we weren't really talking, but I was like, if this was done now, like this would be good. But then I was just like, did she just have sex with a kangaroo? I think she had sex with a kangaroo. Like, is that what's happening? What the fuck?
And to me, even though I can say I don't think Margot Robbie will be bad because the movie is set in Australia. Lori Petty was an American actress, not even trying to do an Australian accent. Margot Robbie is Australian. Like that part will be okay, and we know that she can play kooky,
right,
which is what Tank Girl is. But I think if you get too polished, it takes away from it.
Right, and
so
I'm there would be a line
about a big budget. I would love to see a good director that loved Tank Girl.
I'm only talking a big budget in terms of the effects, because some of the shit they were trying to do, like in terms of how the wasteland looked, you can clearly tell was a cheap green screen, and the effects of like the tank and like some of the action they were doing. If you could touch that, it doesn't even need $50 million would go a long way in a movie like this, because you're not going like super crazy locations and shit like that. You really only need one big name like Margot Robbie to do it. I'm not saying she'd be perfect, but you're going to want a name attached to it. You know what I mean? I feel like this could be really good if done now. The movie as it stands, I was really hard for me to get into. But it's the same thing of like, hey, you know what I love? Buffy the Vampire Slayer. You know what's a rough pilot for anybody to watch that didn't watch it back then? Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I've tried to show that to people, and they look at me like, this is the dumbest thing. And I'm like, no, but it's awesome because of all this. You know what I mean?
And I think that is the thing, especially if it's something that you grew up on and it was the first of its type, because the feelings that you got, the seeing this for the first time and going, oh my God, I can't believe they did that. I've never seen that before. Rachel Talalay used to work with John Waters, and I don't know if you know the name John Waters and what that actually means in terms of movies, but John Waters was a director that started in the 70s and always pushed the envelope, like to the point of being kind of like crazy. So he was a director that would put he always put this at the time we called him a cross-dresser, Divine, in all his movies, and he would do things like make Divine eat actual fresh dog poo and film it. Or, I mean, like there were all these things that he used to do to try and push the envelope. And the fact that she worked
That's too far.
That's too
pull
far.
it back. Pull it back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The fact
pull it back about 20% there. John Waters.
Right. The fact that she worked with him made her, I think, the right director for that movie at that time, because she had that sense of like whatever it takes, but I don't think she had support from the studio.
Yeah.
So it would be interesting to see what that looked like in today's terms,
that's kind of my big thing.
It's completely going to matter who the director is.
It would. And also, like, I feel like a script like that, it would be taken a lot better now, because movies similar to that with that level of crazy and whatever, like they would just be viewed upon differently now.
Right.
So, but as it stands, my opinion of that movie, I'm happy if I never watch that again. Like it was totally not my thing, but I needed to preface that I think the concept is cool. The concept is interesting. If you want to lend me the comics, I will happily check out the comics.
I will.
I just couldn't get into the movie.
Yeah.
And that's being honest about it.
So I liked, when I was watching it, I liked the way Lori Petty delivered some lines. I'll just, like, one scene in particular is when she's the bad guy with the hologram head has fallen down. He's got his arm attached to whatever, and he's laying there, and she starts talking like Muhammad Ali and starts punching him. I was watching her do that, and I said, I like that. I like the way she delivered the lines, and I liked the whole thing. I liked her as an actress in this. I think she was good. That's why I say if it was maybe a little bit of tweak on the writing and some directing,
some of the dialogue decisions.
Was rough. Yeah. I think that she could have been even better.
I feel like even done then with that budget, it could have been a lot better if certain things were changed. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And also, here's the deal: that comic book's an R-rated comic book.
Make this a hard R.
It now
fuck
and make it R.
Yes.
And make it the way. Add the things like that into it.
Yeah.
Because that's also part of this.
And then like her whole, because like she's supposed to stumble across like all these bodies and all these people being wasted, and she's so casual, no fucks given about like, oh, mine, like taking a gun and all that shit and shit. That would be so much funnier and so much of like a what the fuck if you saw just carnage, if you saw just people get wrecked, and then her being so crazy and nonchalant about it, I think would go a lot further in showing how that character is. As it stands, you see people get murdered like off camera and shit. So you know what I mean? Like again, premise I feel is good. I think it's a good premise. You know what this movie reminded me of though, just tonally and all that? Super Mario Brothers. Like I feel like that's exactly. I felt the same way watching this.
I didn't watch that, so I don't know.
It's not good. Sorry. But yeah, that's what I thought. That's pretty much all I have to say about it. Anything else, Weapon 2?
No, I'm not like I couldn't. If I was sitting and that came on, like today, I came on and I watched it because part is I wanted to see some parts again and be a little more refreshed to this. But I'm telling you right now, and this is honest. I'm not even just making this up. I liked it more the second time, and I can't tell you why exactly. I'm not saying that it makes sense that I did, but that's why when I was thinking, I think this is the kind of thing that becomes
it probably grows on you the more you watch it.
Yeah,
I can see that.
Because I think this is the thing. Sometimes you go in thinking a movie should be this, okay? And you watch it and it's not that, and you go, oh, I think this is a bad movie because it's not this thing.
Right.
But it's kind of like you saw it, you kind of got your head in a certain direction, and you went back, and I guess without even, trying to come up with something more, I appreciated it more for what it was the second time I watched it than the first time. And so I can't really say much different than that.
That's fair. I'll say this, like, if I was ever just like hanging out with you guys and we were just having some brown water and you guys put it on, I would be fine sitting and watching it again and drinking it and like watching it with someone who loved it. I think would be a fun experience.
Yeah.
I'll never just put it on my own. I'll never just throw it on and watch it. That said, I do really want to read the comic. And if they announce they're making a new one, I will genuinely be excited and curious to see where it goes.
Will you guys go to the movie with me if they make a new one?
Yeah.
If they make a new one, we're reviewing it and you're doing it with us.
Right.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. That's what we do here. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if you noticed.
I know, but sometimes we all go separately, and I want us to go together.
You mean all go together?
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
No, we'll make that happen.
Yeah.
Sure. We can do that.
Yeah.
That's fine. All right.
Yeah.
So I feel like you thought we were going to be a lot meaner to it.
No, I knew you guys weren't going to just be like, I hated it and it sucked. And if you did, I was going to be a little sad. But I knew you weren't going to like it, but I still wanted you to at least watch it.
Yeah. I'm not mad I watched it. Yeah.
I still think that, especially if you saw it when it originally came out, Tank Girl is one of the characters where people say she's my spirit animal.
I get it.
And
yeah.
she is.
Yeah. I believe if you watched it when it came out and you're a girl or a woman specifically, 100%. I think even if I had watched this when I was 10 when this came out, I probably would have liked it a lot more. So that's why I'm saying a new one I think would be good.
There's tons of movies that I watched a long time ago and thought they were really good. And some of them only because I watched them back then, I still think are good. And some of them I look now and I think it's a horrible.
And
But when I watched them, I thought they were really good. And some of them I really like, where if I just had seen them now, I probably wouldn't like
100% agree. And that's partly why I don't rewatch movies from my childhood that I really liked, because I'm afraid that they're going to suck now, because I have a little bit more of a critical eye. And some stuff just doesn't hold up. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
So, but I didn't hate it. It's just not my thing. So
I didn't think it would be your thing,
Yeah.
but I still wanted you to watch it.
that's totally fine. But
And to
this
be
was
fair,
fun.
like I know you guys give me crap about having not seen The Matrix, but the thing with The Matrix that made it amazing is, and I recognize this having not seen it, is that it was so groundbreaking for when it came out. There were so many effects that hadn't been done yet, and now they've been copied.
That's the thing. If you watched it now, it's
Mm-hmm.
going to feel like every other thing. So you're not going to get why it was so great when it happened.
Right.
Spoiler alert, when it's my turn to pick a movie we all need to watch, that's probably going to be it.
I had already guessed that.
Yeah.
I haven't watched it yet, but I had already.
Well, we
guessed
haven't
that.
said yet who's going next or who's going to pick one. But this is actually fun, picking something that one of us at least hasn't seen. Or
I like it because it makes us watch movies. You guys never would have watched this without.
No, I was probably going to watch it at some point because you kept bugging me about it. But
it's been what, 6 months now?
no, you texted me
while.
the link to it not 6 months ago. It was
No,
like
but we
a couple weeks
talked about
ago.
it a while ago
Yeah.
when we talked about.
I didn't say I would watch it anytime soon, but I said I would probably get to it. Anyway, so this is fun. We'll keep the classic reviews coming and trying to bring you new content despite theaters being closed.
Yes, that's why we're watching old movies
Yep.
that we think each other should watch.
Yep. So we're going to keep this going. If you have any suggestions or recommendations of stuff you would like us to review that are classic movies, let us know. We're always down for suggestions. Closing thoughts?
No, it's great. I'm glad we saw it. I'm glad we could talk about it.
Yep.
Do you know which movie that you're going to assign to us?
I haven't made up my mind. I have a whole
guys.
list. I have a large list of movies.
Well, you're gonna have to pick one first.
I will pick one.
Well, how about I just go next and we get ready to do The Matrix?
Let's do it.
Okay. Matrix is coming next.
All right.
Hey,
Matrix.
guys. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the world's greatest news and reviews. If you've enjoyed, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications.
Peace.